Hey guys, it's Eddie and today I am back with another movie review for you all. Now today's movie that I'll be reviewing is a film that I saw yesterday in the cinema. I have been wanting to see this film since the first trailer was released, and it's the, of course, much talked about Dunkirk, directed by Christopher Nolan and starring Tom Hardy, Cillian Murphy and Sir Mark Rylance. Now, this film follows three stories or perspectives documenting the awful, terrible events at Dunkirk when the infantry, the soldiers, were stranded on the beach, and there was a call that was sent out for people in Britain on the coast to go and, give their assistance to bring the soldiers back. Obviously, I don't know all of the history of it, but that's the basic premise for this film anyway. And obviously, it's trying to show what happened at Dunkirk. Now, the three stories or perspectives are the Mole, which is the ship on the beach and the soldiers that are on the beach waiting to go home, and their chronology in the film takes place over a space of 1 week. Then we have the Sea, which is Mark Rylance and his sons going across the channel to bring back any stranded soldiers, and their journey takes approximately 1 day. And then we've got Tom Hardy in the air as part of the Air Force that are coming to shoot the German planes out of the sky before they can, do any damage to the soldiers and the boats coming back. And his story takes place over just an hour. And I thought that the way that these mainly separate but eventually intertwining viewpoints was really innovative and fascinating to watch, because seeing the alignment of these stories when they eventually sort of crossed over one another was really cool, and it kept you on your toes because you were wondering how these soldiers and these, people and then the Air Force were going to interact with each other. And I thought that it was a really, really interesting way to pace a film. The three different chronological perspectives was a really, really interesting thing to do, and I thought that it was really, really interesting, and I just liked the method of it. I liked the fact that we got introduced to all of these characters separately, and then we ended up seeing them more or less interact eventually, and I thought that was, it was really cool. And I thought that seeing the sort of three separate sides of the story as well, there's three separate ways in which these characters experience the same event, was awesome, and it just enabled you to feel part of the experience and really understand what these people were going through. Which I thought was just absolutely fantastic. So I give full credit to Christopher Nolan's excellent direction, which I want to talk about now more in detail, because that was the first thing that leapt out at me when I was watching this film. Christopher Nolan, we all know, is a fantastic director, but I think this film only served to prove that fact even further, because the fact that Nolan's direction included things like the cameras being attached or to the sort of placed on the wings of the planes that were flying over the channel and over the beach, and this sort of proximity to the action that the camera and the direction was able to give you, put you right in the middle of that situation. And it really enabled you to feel that panic, to feel that intensity of the moment and of this terrible, terrible event that was, absolutely petrifying for a lot of the people involved. And the direction felt so close, and it felt so fervent, and it was able to produce this exhilarating feeling for the audience, or me personally, where I just felt like I was part of the action. And then, of course, he used shots, along the beach where the soldiers were sat, and they were very sort of long, sweeping shots, and they made you feel very lonely, and they sort of captured the feeling of despair of these poor soldiers marooned on this beach waiting to be taken back to the safety of home. So I thought that this amazing method of his direction, where you were able to feel emotion, whether that was panic or hope, the fact that he was able to produce that some sort of feeling of emotion in almost every shot just shows that Nolan is one of the best modern directors around at the moment. It was just absolutely masterful. And, you know, the different shots obviously that he included, whether it was right in the middle of the fray or whether it was sort of pulled back and it was just, you know, the soldiers sat on the beach, the sort of tenderness of his direction, the way that he was able to understand these characters and use the direction to pull out that emotion from the audience was just something else. I thought it was absolutely beautiful, and you know, he perfectly captured the hopelessness and eventually the slight glimmer of hope that, you know, was probably felt on that day. And you know, obviously I know I study history at university. I've never really studied this period of history, so I can't say, you know, well, that was historically accurate. Whether or not it was historically accurate, I don't really care, because I just thought that as a film, the way that he was able to place you right within that moment was something really, really special. And it actually makes me very pleased that films like this are still around, because I just think that Nolan is able to capture what a lot of film has lost at the moment, that sort of real understanding of his actors and, you know, of the shots and what he is able to do with that camera. It's really wonderful to still see that being done in film, and I was so pleased to see it. You know, I think that he is just a fantastic director, and that was something, I think that was one of the undeniable aspects that made this film so fantastic, his direction. Absolutely 100%. Now the acting, I'll move on to that. It wasn't too much or too little. It didn't feel overworked or overdone, because there was very sparse dialogue actually. It was all about the action and the suspense and ramping that up, and you know, it was more about expressions and that feeling of panic and being able to convey that in a look, or you know, in, you know, just a few words rather than, you know, a lot of dialogue, which was interesting. I always find that that's, you know, often a benefit. I often don't think that, you know, we need a lot of dialogue sometimes, and it's often quite refreshing. So I did find that was quite, you know, innovative and nice every once in a while, that there's a film that doesn't rely too heavily on dialogue, but that was used and delivered was delivered really well by the actors. I thought they did what was necessary, and the actors, they helped to remind you of the people in that situation, and they're very naturalistic acting, you know, rather than being quite brash and over the top and almost like a caricature. They were very naturalistic performances, and that really helped to show that this was a real thing, that this really happened. And I thought that the actors all did what was required of them. I thought that Tom Hardy was fantastic as the pilot. You know, he, even though for most of the time it was just his voice and his eyes because of the mask that was over his face, I thought that it just really showed what a fantastic actor he is, because, you know, if he can convey something just by his eyes darting around or in his voice, it was just able to really add to that feeling of absolute, you know, suspense. And I think that the actors that really shone for me were Tom Hardy and Mark Rylance. Obviously, Mark Rylance being on the boat headed across the channel to help the soldiers out. I thought that he was fantastic. and I thought they fit perfectly into the roles and they did what was required of them, but it wasn't too over the top, and this film didn't rely too heavily on the performances, which was something that was really interesting. I think it was the direction and the choreography of, you know, the boat sinking and you know, the plane, the battle in the sky that was going on between Tom Hardy and the obviously the German Air Force. It was not so reliant on performances, which was interesting, but I thought that those that were in it were great. I was actually surprised by Harry Styles. We all know Harry Styles is in this film. I thought he did a decent job. I don't think he was awful. I wasn't expecting a lot from him. I'll just say that, because obviously we know he's not an actor. But he did what was required of him, and I think that the performances in this film were great, that you can't knock them. Now, I think this film had gorgeous cinematography, that sort of dull blue hue of the sea and the grey sky that was overcast across the channel. It just all fit so perfectly that it meant you couldn't take your eyes off this film for a single second, and I was completely rooted to that screen in the cinema, and I think even on the small screen, even on a TV at home, it will still have that effect. Whether it's the action or the actual look of the film, I think both worked perfectly well to really draw you in. So this film really did have some beautiful shots, as well as some very sort of fervent, terrifying moments, so it was the kind of perfect balance for me. With regard to acting, I do feel like some chances were missed with some of the actors in this film. We had some really fantastic names in this film, and as I said, I know this film wasn't all about the performances. They were actually quite muted and drawn back, and they only did what was required of them. But I do feel like when you've got someone like Cillian Murphy in the film, you should use him to his full capacity, because I feel like the character of his sort of shell-shocked soldier that was stranded on a U-boat and rescued, sometimes I felt like they could have used him a bit more. That's probably just me speaking from a personal standpoint of being a fan of his work, especially in stuff like Peaky Blinders, where you can really see him as for the fantastic actor that he is. But I do feel like they didn't use him as much as they should have, because I think that, you know, his talent is really special, and I do feel like he was a little bit wasted. But he did a great job for the part he had, so I can't really moan. That was just something that I picked up on. Also, obviously being someone that's British, this film did evoke a feeling of a lot of patriotism in me inadvertently. I couldn't really help feeling, you know, that sense of pride when the soldiers returned and all of the people were supporting them. And I suppose I don't know how this film might be received from people that are not British. They might not be able to feel that emotion, but I feel that this sort of patriotism element in the film was kind of an integral part of the emotion that was intended to be evoked for the audience. But nevertheless, you know, whether you're British or not, I think you can't deny that this film was really skillful, especially in its direction. And I suppose, even though it's, you know, a kind of a celebration for the British, I guess, this film, it's not actually that simple, because it was fraught with really complex characters. For example, Cillian Murphy and Harry Styles' character, which he was kind of a very xenophobic character, and his sort of bullying almost of the undercover French soldier in the film was, you know, something that made you think, you know, this isn't just as straightforward as being, yay, you know, go British, you know, you can do this, you can save yourself. So I think even though it kind of relies on patriotism, this film, it is still a great film in itself. And I think that, I don't know, anyone can appreciate its strong points, which are its acting and are its direction. So yeah, that was just the point that I thought that, you know, was it relying too heavily on the sort of yay, go Britain aspect? But I think you can't deny that it was, you know, a really fantastic, well-crafted film despite all of that. Overall, I thought this film was adrenaline filled. It was emotional. It contained some masterful direction from Christopher Nolan and acting that really drew you in and made you feel for this historical situation with real people, and utterly convinced you and kept you on edge until the very, very last minute with some beautiful cinematography. I thought this film had the whole package. So if I had to give it a rating, I'd probably give it 5 out of 5 stars. Apart from those few minor points and queries, I really can't knock this film. I think that it just proves that Christopher Nolan is something else when it comes to being a fantastic director. So yeah, that's my take on Dunkirk. I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. Remember, you can always request movies for me to review by commenting below or messaging me on my Tumblr. Link is always in the description. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, guys, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.